Hi there, it's Loni. It's been a while. It's been a probably close to a year and a half since I've done a YouTube video. A lot has gone on, as you all are aware of. Our world has been groaning, and it's just taken me a while because I think with the beginning of COVID, there was time for me to do this, and then once the restrictions lifted, I sort of hit the ground running. But it's been on my heart for a while, and I thought today was a good day just to sort of pick it back up. So welcome everybody. I appreciate you listening. My name is Loni Ison. I'm a marriage, family, and child therapist. Been a clinician for about 30 years. And there's things that happen over the course of a person's career in this type of work because you can't do the work without having to deepen within yourself. It's just impossible. So, 30 years of doing this work, it also takes on a spiritual form to it as well. So I wanted to talk to you today about a topic that's really near and dear to my heart, and I'm going to put my glasses so I can read my notes. Thank you. The topic is healing the wound of the heart. And how in the world do we heal the wound of our heart when we live in imperfect relationships and we live in an imperfect world? How do we do that? It's a big question. And, just something to think about. Have you ever, had a glorious, blissful moment with your beloved, and then 20 minutes later, something happens and you're at a stalemate? How does that happen? How can you go from this total bliss to then such hurt and activation of triggers? What happens? And when we get triggered, hurt comes up, anger comes up, hatred comes up. And my big question as a therapist is, how do we as human beings, how do we negotiate that? And where does it come from? How can we have that perfect, blissful feeling of love on one hand, and then in an hour or two later, that's all gone. And now you're sort of fueling your grievances and going through a rationale of why you are hurt. So I'm going to share a proverb with you. It's a Chinese proverb, and I have it hanging in my house. And it says, and this I think is true for us in our world that we're living in today: if there is light in the soul, there will be beauty in the person. If there is beauty in the person, there will be harmony in the house. If there is harmony in the house, there will be order in the nation. And if there is order in the nation, there will be peace in the world. So what happens to us? How do we do that? How it sounds like a panacea, kind of a utopia of Pollyanna kind of points of view, but it's really not. And it has to start with us. If there is light in our soul, well, how in the world do we get light in our soul? How do we navigate that? Where do we find that? And so, as a clinician, I've spent a lot of time and had the honest privilege of just sitting with people in the stories of their lives. And as I've done that, I have begun to recognize that people's grievances that they have towards the other is really connected to an earlier experience, to no fault of their own, where they did not feel loved. And that doesn't mean you were raised by abusive parents. It doesn't mean that, horrible things happen. Maybe they did, hopefully not. But for the most part, we've had good enough parenting. There's a therapist called Charles Winnicott, and he coined that good enough parenting, or good enough mothering, really. But what happens in those earlier experiences, we were born into imperfect families who were dealing with their own personal struggles of survival, getting food on the table, maybe had to work 2 or 3 jobs, struggling maybe as a single parent, maybe struggling with addiction, maybe there's just lots of possibilities. But for the most part, our parents, they got us to school. We had shoes on our feet. We had sweaters on when it was cold. They did the best they could. Maybe not enough, obviously, because many of us, did have parents that were harsh. But the truth is, those messages that we got from that harshness back there, we had to formulate an idea in order to survive that, which is, I must not be lovable. I must not be worth being loved. So then moving forward, we come up through adulthood, and then lo and behold, we have someone that we love, and then now we feel safe, and then something happens. We get triggered, we get activated, and what happens? It's a reminder. It triggers us, and if you really you drill down and go all the way back, when those grievances come, they are reminders that we are not lovable. And that stems way, way back. So because of that, we are challenged to heal that and develop light in our soul. Because if there's light in our soul, there will be beauty in the person. Navajos called this the beauty way. But there is something about learning how to really understand that we are worth being loved. But it starts with us. Because what happens in a partnership or a relationship or in a country or between countries, there's the micro and the macro. And so if two people have a hard time at a micro level trying to figure out how to negotiate grievances, how in the world do we expect our world leaders to be able to do it? We can't. So it has to begin with each one of us, which is a tall order, right? Because it's easier to point the fingers and say, well, when they do it or they do it. And, the churches have tried to be the standard for this. They've done as best of work that they can do. But at the same time, there was something that failed miserably because it forgot to teach us how lovable we are, that we are worth being loved. And what does that look like? How do we do that? How do we negotiate going back and revisiting those imperfect parents and then find kindness and forgiveness so that we can then move forward into our adult life and recognize those triggers? And that's a challenge. It's a real challenge because, therapist included, it's not always easy. It's not always easy because it's trying to make sense out of something that we may have put deep, deep, deep down and buried. So when we were back there in our younghood, if you will, and our needs were maybe being met on one day and maybe not on the other, but we learned at the core of that, in order to survive, I just must not be lovable. If I just tried harder, if I was just smarter, if I was just more talented, whatever the justs are, if I was a better softball player, if I was a better student, maybe then they would love me. Well, the truth is, they most likely were doing the very best that they could, and they had no more to give because you can't give away something you don't have. So if they were imperfect beings and their needs were not being met and they, at the core of who they are, didn't feel loved, that's going to pass on to you. And then you're going to grow up and move it forward. And then it happens in our interpersonal relationships. So self-love is not a healthy dose of narcissism. It's not, oh, it's all about me. It's not, oh, I've got to do this and I've got to do that, because money and things are just another way to put a Band-Aid on a wound. And we see a culture full of people that do that, thinking that if they have a bigger this, a better that, a newer this, a newer that, I'll trade this one for that one. And people just spend their entire precious life searching and looking, when the truth is, it's right here. And how do you tap into that? How do you find that right here? Well, I think it starts with recognizing the uncomfortableness of when those uncomfortable emotions come up. And oftentimes it causes a strain, it causes a hiccup in a relationship. My husband and I call it, we have to have a radical conversation, because it is radical. Because you're talking about things that are murky, that you're not even really sure where they're coming from, but you just know that you're being triggered. So you have to kind of sort that out and figure out, what the heck is this? What is getting activated in me? So, and then when you sit with those uncomfortable feelings, and they're not always pleasant when you have to look inside. And there's maybe shame attached to them. Oh, I shouldn't feel like that. Oh, I shouldn't think like that. Oh, that's awful of me. Well, as long as you keep spinning in that, you're going to stay stuck. But when you lift it up and you recognize, oh, I'm feeling hurt right now, and I'm going to connect this to an earlier experience. Oh, I know, because when I go back there was a story in my storyline that said, I wasn't lovable. I wasn't worth it, for whatever reason. Not any fault of my mom's, but because of just life and the circumstances that we live in. So when you look at this and you think about it at even a world level, I mean, there's some horrific things going on our planet right now. And the reality of it is, I'm going to share something with you, because this French author said, there is no bad person. There's just a person that feels unloved. And that's a hard one to really wrap your head around, because if that's the case, then we have a planet full of people that feel unloved, and the only way that they can feel loved is by taking over territory, taking over power, taking over land, taking over. And at the end of the day, there is even someone who is a full-blown antisocial personality disorder. Deep down inside them, they don't feel loved. And so does that mean that we can go around the world and make excuses for people that are doing bad things? Absolutely not. But it does help if you begin to look at them through a different lens. And so I would invite you today to stay curious about this. I'll be coming back and speaking more about it. But if you could take something away today from this, which is to look back at your family of origin with kindness, understanding, and understand that they were imperfect beings carrying their own brand of burdens. And then moving forward, when those uncomfortable feelings come up for you and you feel ashamed, you feel like you want to fight about it, you want to take it to task, see if you can sit with those uncomfortable feelings and allow them to be, and then meet them with kindness and understanding, the same way that you would meet your family. So it's a dual conversation, back and forth and back and forth. And a lot of people want to stay stuck in the past, but it's not necessary. So thank you for listening. I'll do more of these. It's been a while. Obviously you can tell my hair has changed a bit. It's now my COVID gray. But blessings to all of you, and until we meet again. Thank you.